The silence aboard the Eternal Dawn felt heavier than the void of space itself. Captain Park Jin-woo stood at attention beside the glass coffin, his hands clasped behind his back. Inside the transparent case lay Admiral Lee Tae-min, the man who had saved humanity from eternal war with the dragons. The Admiral's face looked peaceful, almost like he was sleeping. But Park knew better. 3 days ago, his mentor had collapsed in his office, victim of a rare genetic disease that struck without warning. Park's throat tightened as he watched the steady stream of visitors pass by the coffin. Generals, admirals, politicians, and common soldiers all came to pay their respects. Each person stopped, saluted, and moved on in respectful silence. The ceremonial hall of the flagship had been transformed into a place of mourning, with Earth's blue and white banners hanging alongside the golden flags of the Human Defense Force. "Captain Park," a soft voice called from behind him. He turned to see Ambassador Kim So-ra approaching. Her usually perfect diplomatic composure showed cracks of worry around her eyes. She wore the formal black robes of her office, but her hand shook slightly as she clutched a data pad. "Ambassador," Park said, giving her a slight bow. "Thank you for coming. How are you holding up?" Kim asked, her voice gentle. Park looked back at the coffin. "I keep expecting him to sit up and tell me to stop looking so grim. He hated when we got too serious during ceremonies." Kim managed a sad smile. "He would have made jokes about his own funeral, wouldn't he?" "Probably would have complained that we made the flowers too fancy," Park replied. Then his expression grew serious. "Ambassador, we need to discuss the funeral arrangements. The Admiral left specific instructions." Kim's eyebrows rose. "What kind of instructions?" Park pulled out his own data pad and handed it to her. "Read Section 7. Kim's eyes scanned the text and her face went pale. "He wants dragon representatives at the funeral. Is this some kind of mistake?" "I checked 3 times. The message is authentic, recorded just 2 weeks ago. He knew his condition was getting worse." Park's voice dropped to a whisper. "He says it's important for the peace treaty. Captain, you understand what this means?" Kim's voice carried a note of panic. "Half the military command will refuse to attend if dragons are present. The other half might try to start a fight. And Earth's government?" She shook her head. "They're already nervous about the treaty." Park nodded grimly. "I know, but those were his orders. Admiral Lee Tae-min died believing this was necessary." They were interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Yoon Hae-jin, the Admiral's longtime friend and research partner. The elderly scientist moved slowly, his gray hair disheveled and his lab coat wrinkled. His eyes were red from crying. "Jin-woo," Dr. Yoon said, his voice hoarse. "I came as soon as I could. The transport from the research station took forever." "Dr. Yoon," Park said, grateful to see a familiar face. "I'm glad you're here. The Admiral would have wanted you at his side." Dr. Yoon approached the coffin and placed his hand on the glass. 30 years we worked together. 30 years of trying to understand how to make peace with species that wanted to burn our worlds." He looked up at Park. "Did he suffer?" "No," Park said quickly. "It was very fast. He was reviewing reports one moment and the next, he couldn't finish the sentence." Dr. Yoon nodded slowly, then noticed the tension between Park and Ambassador Kim. "What's wrong? You both look like you've seen a ghost." Kim handed him the data pad, the Admiral's funeral instructions. "Read Section 7. Dr. Yoon's eyes widened as he read. Then surprisingly he smiled. "Of course he did. That brilliant, crazy old warrior. You think this is a good idea?" Kim asked, incredulous. "I think Tae-min knew something we don't," Dr. Yoon replied. "He spent the last 5 years studying dragon culture, trying to understand their concept of honor. He believed that peace meant more than just not shooting at each other." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Commander Choi Min-ho, a young officer who had served directly under Admiral Lee. His uniform was crisp, but his eyes showed the same grief they all felt. "Captain," Commander Choi said, saluting. "General Lim Dong-wook requests to speak with you immediately." "He seems upset about something," Park sighed. General Lim was one of the most vocal opponents of the Dragon Peace Treaty. If he had learned about the Admiral's funeral wishes, there would be trouble. "Where is he?" Park asked. "Conference room 3. He brought half the senior staff with him." Park looked at Ambassador Kim. "We knew this would happen eventually." "I'll come with you," Kim said. "This is going to require diplomatic language." As they prepared to leave, Dr. Yoon called out, "Jin-woo, wait. There's something else you should know about Tae-min's research." He was working on something special before he died. Something about the biological similarities between humans and dragons. What kind of similarities? Park asked. The kind that might explain why he thought dragons would understand our concept of honor. Dr. Yoon's expression was mysterious. I'll need time to review his notes, but I think he discovered something important. Park felt a chill run down his spine. The Admiral had always been 3 steps ahead of everyone else. Even in death, he was still teaching them. The walk to Conference Room 3 felt like a march to execution. Park could hear General Lim's angry voice through the door before they even reached it. "This is madness," the general was saying. "We're supposed to invite the creatures that killed millions of our people to a funeral. What's next, putting them in charge of our defense?" Park took a deep breath and opened the door. Inside, he found General Lim pacing back and forth in front of a table full of senior officers. All conversation stopped when Park and Ambassador Kim entered. "Captain Park," General Lim said, his voice like ice. "I understand you've received some very disturbing instructions from our late Admiral." "Sir, the Admiral's final wishes were very clear," Park replied, keeping his voice steady. "His final wishes were the thoughts of a dying man." General Lim slammed his hand on the table. "Possibly affected by his illness. We cannot honor a request that puts our entire military at risk." Ambassador Kim stepped forward. "General, with respect, the Admiral was mentally sharp until the very end. His doctors confirmed that his disease only affected his body, not his mind." "Then he made an error in judgment," General Lim said. "I will not have dragons on this ship during a ceremony honoring our greatest hero." Park felt anger rising in his chest. "Sir, Admiral Lee Taemin saved humanity from extinction. If he believed this was important, shouldn't we at least consider why?" "The answer is no, Captain. Final answer." The room fell silent. Park realized this was the moment that would define everything that came after. He could obey General Lim and ignore the Admiral's wishes, keeping the peace within the human military. Or he could honor his mentor's final request and risk everything. Before he could speak, a young communications officer burst into the room. "Sir, emergency message from the outer sensor grid," the officer said, breathing hard. "We have incoming ships, dragon ships. A full diplomatic escort headed directly for our position." General Lim went white. "What?" "The lead ship is transmitting diplomatic codes," the officer continued. "They're requesting permission to attend Admiral Lee Taemin's funeral." Park felt his heart stop. Somehow the dragons already knew about the Admiral's death. They were coming whether the humans were ready or not. The funeral that could end the truce had just become inevitable. The main view screen in the command center showed something that made every human officer hold their breath. 3 massive dragon warships moved through space like ancient predators hunting in the void. Their black hulls were covered in golden scales that caught the light from distant stars. The largest ship was bigger than anything in the human fleet, its design both beautiful and terrifying. Captain Park Jin-woo stood behind the command chair, watching the ships approach. General Lim Dong-wook paced beside him like a caged animal, his face red with anger and fear. "They have enough firepower to destroy this entire fleet," General Lim muttered. "This could be a trap. Maybe they're using the funeral as an excuse to attack." "Sir," the communications officer called out, "the lead ship is hailing us. Audio only." "Put it through," Park said before General Lim could object. A deep voice filled the command center, speaking perfect human language with a slight accent that sounded like distant thunder. "Human vessel Eternal Dawn, this is Warcast Dragon Lord Thexmore of the ship Burning Honor. I request permission to board your vessel to pay respects to Admiral Lee Taemin." General Lim's eyes went wide. Every human in the room knew that name. Thexmore had been Admiral Lee's greatest enemy during the war. They had fought each other in a dozen battles across 3 star systems. Thexmore was the dragon who had nearly destroyed Earth's 3rd Fleet at the Battle of Kepler Station. "This has to be some kind of joke," General Lim whispered. Ambassador Kim So-ra, who had arrived just minutes before, stepped forward. "Dragon Lord Thexmore, this is Ambassador Kim So-ra of the Human Diplomatic Corps. May I ask why you wish to attend our Admiral's funeral?" There was a long pause before the dragon answered. "Ambassador Kim, in my culture, when a worthy enemy dies, it is our duty to honor their passing. Admiral Lee Taemin was the most honorable human I ever fought. His death diminishes us all." Park felt a chill run through the room. The idea that a dragon would call a human honorable was almost impossible to believe. During the war, dragons had seen humans as nothing more than pests to be eliminated. Permission denied, General Lim said quickly, grabbing the communication device. Dragon Lord, you are not welcome on this vessel. Another voice came through the speakers, younger and lighter than Thexmore's. Honored humans, this is Hatchling Scout Kindar, cultural liaison for the dragon delegation. Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding. We come bearing gifts of respect, not weapons of war. General Lim turned to Park. Captain, I order you to raise shields and prepare for battle. This is obviously some kind of dragon trick. Wait, Dr. Yoon Hyejin said, entering the command center with a data pad in his hands. General, I've been reviewing Admiral Lee's personal logs. You need to hear this. Dr. Yoon activated the data pad and Admiral Lee's voice filled the room. The recording was clearly recent as the Admiral's voice carried the weakness of his final illness. If anyone is listening to this, the Admiral's voice said, it means I'm dead and Thexmore has come to my funeral. Don't be afraid. 3 years ago, during the peace negotiations, Thexmore saved my life. We were attacked by pirates and he could have let me die. Instead, he fought beside me. That day I learned that dragons understand honor the same way we do. The recording continued. Thexmore is not just any dragon. He's old even by their standards. He's fought in wars that humans can barely imagine. But he follows a code of honor that would make any human soldier proud. If he comes to my funeral, it's because he genuinely respects what we built together. General Lim's face went through several expressions as he listened. Confusion, anger, and finally something that might have been understanding. General, Ambassador Kim said softly, the Admiral trusted Thexmore enough to want him at his funeral. Maybe we should trust the Admiral's judgment. The Dragon Fleet is holding position, the communications officer reported. They're not moving closer, but they're not leaving either. Park made a decision that would change everything. Dragon Lord Thexmore, this is Captain Park Jinwoo, Admiral Lee's former aide. You may board the Eternal Dawn with a small honor guard. Standard diplomatic protocols will apply, Captain. General Lim started to protest. Sir, with respect, this ship is under my command for the duration of the funeral. The Admiral left me in charge of the arrangements. Park's voice was firm but respectful. I'm honoring his wishes. 20 minutes later, Park stood in the main docking bay watching the most impossible sight of his life. A dragon shuttle, sleek and golden, settled onto the deck with barely a sound. The bay had been cleared of all non-essential personnel, but those who remained stared in amazement. The shuttle door opened, and Park's breath caught in his throat. Dragon Lord Thexmore was even larger than he had imagined. The dragon was at least 12 feet tall, with scales that shifted from deep black to gold depending on the light. His eyes were like molten amber, ancient and intelligent. Despite his size, he moved with surprising grace. Behind Thexmore came a much smaller dragon, barely 7 feet tall with bright silver scales. This had to be Hatchling Scout Kindar. The young dragon carried a ceremonial box made of some kind of crystalline material. Captain Park Jinwoo, Thexmore said, his voice rumbling through the bay. I thank you for this courtesy. I know many of your people would rather see me dead than standing on your ship. Park saluted, not knowing what else to do. Dragon Lord Thexmore, welcome aboard the Eternal Dawn. Admiral Lee would have been honored by your presence. Thexmore's massive head tilted slightly. The honor is mine, Captain. Admiral Lee was a warrior worth respecting. In all my years of battle, I have met few humans who fought with such courage and wisdom. Commander Choi Minho, who had been standing behind Park, stepped forward nervously. Your Honor, your Lordship. Sir, what should we call you? The young dragon, Chindar, made a sound that might have been laughter. Among humans, Lord Thexmore is appropriate. I am simply Scout Kindar. Scout Kindar, Commander Choi said. I fought at the Battle of Kepler Station. Your people were formidable opponents. As were yours, Chindar replied. That battle is studied in our military academies as an example of human tactical brilliance. Your Admiral Lee turned certain defeat into victory through pure cunning. Park watched in amazement as the two young officers began to talk about the battle from their different perspectives. It was surreal to hear former enemies discussing their fights like old veterans sharing war stories. Captain, Thexmore said, drawing Park's attention back. I must ask something difficult. May I see Admiral Lee's body? In dragon culture, we cannot properly honor the dead without looking upon them one final time. Park nodded. Of course. We'll escort you to the ceremonial hall. The walk through the ship's corridors was tense. Human crew members pressed themselves against the walls as the dragon delegation passed. staring in fearful amazement. Some saluted, unsure of the proper protocol. Others just watched with wide eyes. When they reached the ceremonial hall, Thexmore stopped at the entrance. His massive frame filled the doorway as he looked at Admiral Lee's coffin. For a long moment, the Dragon Lord was perfectly still. "He looks peaceful," Thexmore said finally. "Death was kind to him." The Dragon Lord approached the coffin slowly, his clawed feet making soft clicking sounds on the metal floor. When he reached the glass case, he placed one massive hand on its surface. "Admiral Lee Taman," Thexmore said in a voice so soft that Park had to strain to hear it. "You were my enemy, but you were also my teacher. You showed me that humans could be more than the weak creatures we thought you were. You showed me that honor exists in all species that choose to embrace it." Park felt tears forming in his eyes. He had expected many things from this meeting, but not this kind of genuine emotion from a dragon. "Lord Thexmore," Park said quietly, "the Admiral left instructions that you should be allowed to participate in the funeral ceremony if you wished." Thexmore's head turned toward Park, and for the first time the dragon's expression showed surprise. "He knew I would come?" "He hoped you would," Park replied. "He believed that your presence would mean something important for the future of our species." "Captain," a voice shouted from the hallway. General Lim burst into the ceremonial hall with several armed guards behind him. "Step away from that coffin immediately." The tension in the room spiked instantly. Thexmore straightened to his full height, and Park could see the dragon's muscles tense beneath his scales. Scout Chindar moved closer to his lord, one hand moving toward something that might have been a weapon. "General Lim," Park said quickly, "Lord Thexmore is here as our guest." "That creature is not a guest," General Lim snapped. "It's an enemy warrior on a human ship during a sacred ceremony. This ends now." Thexmore's voice when he spoke was like controlled thunder. "General Lim Dong-wook, I remember you from the peace negotiations. You still believe that dragons and humans can never coexist." "I believe that predators don't change their nature," General Lim replied, his hand resting on his sidearm, the moment balanced on a knife's edge. Park realized that whatever happened next would determine whether Admiral Lee's dream of lasting peace would live or die in this room. The ceremonial hall felt like a powder keg ready to explode. General Lim's guards had their hands on their weapons, while Dragon Lord Thexmore stood perfectly still beside Admiral Lee's coffin. The massive dragon's amber eyes fixed on General Lim with an intensity that made the air feel electric. "General," Captain Park Jin-woo said carefully, "please lower your weapons. Lord Thexmore is here under diplomatic protection." "Diplomatic protection?" General Lim's voice cracked with anger. "That monster burned 3 of our colonies during the war. He killed thousands of humans, and now you want me to treat him like an honored guest?" Thexmore's deep voice rumbled through the hall. "General Lim speaks truth. I did burn your colonies. I did kill your people, just as your Admiral Lee destroyed my nest worlds and slaughtered my kin." The dragon's head turned toward the coffin, yet here I stand, mourning his death. Scout Chindar stepped forward, the young dragon's silver scales catching the light. "Honored General, may I speak? In dragon culture there is a saying, the enemy who teaches you strength becomes your teacher. The teacher who earns your respect becomes your brother. I don't care about your culture," General Lim snapped. "I care about protecting human lives." "Then you should listen to what Admiral Lee learned," Dr. Yoon Hae-jin said, entering the hall with another data pad. "I've been studying his research all night. What he discovered changes everything." Dr. Yoon activated the device, and Admiral Lee's voice filled the room again. This recording sounded even more recent than the last one. "Personal log, Admiral Lee Taman, 2 days before my death," the Admiral's tired voice said. "Dr. Yoon, if you're listening to this, share what we found with everyone. The biological scans we did during the peace negotiations revealed something incredible. Dragons and humans evolved completely separately, on worlds thousands of light years apart. Yet both species developed nearly identical neural patterns for recognizing honor, courage, and sacrifice." The recording continued. "It's not just cultural similarity. It's biological. When Thexmore saved my life during the pirate attack, his brain scans showed the same electrical patterns that human brains show when we perform acts of heroism. We're more alike than either species ever imagined." General Lim's face went through several emotions as he listened. Confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been wonder. "That's impossible," General Lim said finally. "Dragons are predators, killers. So are humans," Thexmore replied quietly. Yet here we stand trying to build peace instead of continuing war. Perhaps that is what your admiral understood. Perhaps that is why he wanted me here. Commander Choi Min-ho, who had been standing silently near the wall, suddenly spoke up. Lord Thexmore, may I ask you something? During the Battle of Kepler Station, when our ships were disabled, your forces could have destroyed us completely. Why didn't you? Thexmore's massive head turned toward the young commander. Because Admiral Lee's ships were filled with wounded. To kill wounded enemies brings no honor. It is the act of a coward, not a warrior. But we were told that dragons took no prisoners, Commander Choi said, confused. We took no prisoners because you humans always chose to fight to the death rather than surrender, Scout Kindar explained. We thought it was because you were too proud to show weakness. We didn't understand that you were protecting your families back home. Ambassador Kim So-ra, who had been listening to the exchange, stepped forward. Lord Thexmore, I need to ask directly. Why did you really come here? The truth. Thexmore was quiet for a long moment, looking down at Admiral Lee's peaceful face through the glass. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight of years and regret. Because Admiral Lee taught me that war does not have to be forever, the Dragon Lord said. 3 years ago, when the pirates attacked our peace negotiation ship, I watched your admiral throw himself between their weapons and my wounded aide. A human risking his life for a dragon he barely knew. In that moment, I understood that honor has no species. The dragon's voice grew softer. I am old even by dragon standards. I have fought in wars that lasted centuries. I have seen entire worlds burn. But I had never seen an enemy become a friend until I met Admiral Lee Taemin. General Lim's hand slowly moved away from his weapon. You really respected him. I respected him more than any warrior I have ever known, Thexmore replied. Human or dragon? Dr. Yoon activated his datapad again. There's more. The Admiral left specific instructions for integrating dragon and human funeral traditions. He studied dragon mourning rituals for months. What kind of rituals? Park asked. Scout Chindar answered. In dragon culture, when a great warrior dies, all who knew him must speak of his deeds. Both friend and enemy. Only when all stories are told can the warrior's spirit find peace. The Admiral wanted both human and dragon officers to share their memories of him, Dr. Yoon explained. He believed it would help both species understand each other better. General Lim shook his head. This is madness. Half the fleet will refuse to participate. The other half will try to start fights. Maybe, Park said, but those were his orders. And frankly, General, if Admiral Lee thought this was important enough to risk everything for, shouldn't we trust his judgment? The debate was interrupted by an urgent beeping from the communication system. The voice of the ship's sensor operator crackled through the speakers. Captain Park, we have a problem. Long-range sensors are detecting multiple ship movements throughout the sector. It looks like other alien species are heading in our direction. What other species? Ambassador Kim asked, alarm in her voice. At least 3 different fleets, ma'am. The Hegemony Collective, the Voidwalkers, and what looks like Crystalline Empire ships. They're all converging on our position. Park felt his blood run cold. The Hegemony Collective had been neutral during the Human-Dragon War, but they were known to profit from conflict between other species. The Voidwalkers were mysterious and dangerous. The Crystalline Empire had their own complicated relationship with both humans and dragons. How long until they arrive? Park asked. 12 hours for the closest fleet, sir. Thexmore's expression darkened. Captain Park, this is not coincidence. Someone has told them about this funeral. They come to watch and see if the peace between our species survives, or to make sure it doesn't, Ambassador Kim said grimly. General Lim stepped forward, his earlier hostility replaced by concern. If hostile fleets are coming, we need to prepare for battle. Lord Thexmore, will your ships fight alongside ours if necessary? The Dragon Lord's amber eyes met General Lim's. General, I came here to honor a fallen warrior. If others threaten this ceremony, they insult Admiral Lee's memory. That I cannot allow. We need to notify Earth Command immediately, Ambassador Kim said. This funeral has become an interstellar incident. No, Dr. Yoon said firmly. If we call for reinforcements now, it will look like we expected trouble. It will make every species think the peace treaty is failing. Commander Choi looked between the humans and dragons. So what do? We can't fight 3 alien fleets. We can if we work together, Scout Chindar said quietly. Dragon ships and human ships fighting as allies instead of enemies. Thexmore nodded slowly. The young scout speaks wisdom. Perhaps this is the test Admiral Lee knew would come. Park felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders. The decision he made in the next few minutes could determine the future of two species. All right, Park said finally. We continue with the funeral as planned, but we also prepare for the possibility of battle. Lord Thexmore, are you willing to coordinate our defenses with yours? I am honored to do so, Thexmore replied. General Lim looked around the room at the assembled humans and dragons. I still think this is insane, but if Admiral Lee believed in it, he straightened his shoulders. Then I'll follow his orders one last time. As if summoned by their words, the ship's computer chimed with an incoming message. The voice that came through the speakers was cold and mechanical, clearly artificial. Human vessel Eternal Dawn, this is Hegemony Fleet Command. We are approaching your position to observe the historic funeral of Admiral Lee Taemin. Any attempts to prevent our observation will be considered acts of aggression. Thexmore's lips pulled back, revealing teeth like sword blades. They do not come to observe. They come to watch us fail. Then we won't fail, Park said with more confidence than he felt. We'll give Admiral Lee the funeral he deserves, and we'll protect it from anyone who tries to interfere. But as he looked around the room at the mixed group of humans and dragons, Park couldn't help but wonder if they were strong enough to face what was coming. The command center of the Eternal Dawn had become a hive of activity unlike anything Captain Park Jin-woo had ever seen. Human officers worked alongside dragon technicians, their scaled hands moving over control panels with surprising delicacy. Dragon Lord Thexmore stood beside the main tactical display, his massive frame somehow fitting perfectly into the command structure. Hegemony Fleet is holding position at the edge of the system, reported Lieutenant Han Kyung-mi from the sensor station. 3 heavy cruisers and a command ship. They're running full scans on all our vessels. The Voidwalkers are more concerning, Scout Chindar added, her silver eyes focused on a smaller display. They're known for using stealth technology. They could be much closer than we think, Park nodded grimly. In the 6 hours since the alien fleets had been detected, everything had changed. What should have been a simple funeral was now a complex military operation with interstellar consequences. Status report on the funeral preparations, Park asked. Commander Choi Min-ho looked up from his datapad. The ceremonial hall has been reconfigured to accommodate both human and dragon traditions. Dr. Yoon finished setting up the memory-sharing displays. We're ready to begin the ceremony in 4 hours. And our defensive preparations? General Lim asked. The general had surprised everyone by throwing himself into the joint planning with the dragons. Thexmore's voice rumbled through the command center. Dragon and human ships are now operating under unified command protocols. It is unusual but effective. My ship commanders report that human tactical thinking is more flexible than they expected. Your dragons are faster learners than our people thought too, General Lim admitted. I never imagined we could coordinate this well. The moment of cooperation was interrupted by an urgent alarm. The communications officer's face went pale as she listened to her earpiece. Captain, we're receiving a priority message from an unknown source, audio only, heavily encrypted. Put it through, Park ordered. A human voice filled the command center, but something about it sounded wrong. Cold and emotionless in a way that made Park's skin crawl. Captain Park Jin-woo, this is Agent Kang Hyun-soo of the Hegemony Intelligence Division. I have information you need to hear. Park exchanged glances with General Lim. Agent Kang's name was familiar, but they couldn't place it immediately. Agent Kang, identify yourself properly, Ambassador Kim demanded. I was Lieutenant Kang Hyun-soo, Human Defense Force, until 3 years ago. I served under Admiral Lee during the final battles of the war. I watched him negotiate peace with the creatures that killed my family. The voice continued, growing colder. The Admiral was a fool, Captain Park. He believed that dragons could change their nature. But predators are always predators. They're using this funeral to gather intelligence on human defenses. Thexmore's eyes blazed with anger. This human speaks lies. Do I? Agent Kang's voice carried a bitter laugh. Dragon Lord Thexmore, how convenient that you arrived just after the Admiral's death. How did you know about it so quickly? Our communications to Dragon Space should have taken days to arrive. Park felt a chill run down his spine. It was a good question. How had the dragons learned about Admiral Lee's death so fast? Answer him, General Lim said quietly to Thexmore. The Dragon Lord's expression was unreadable. We have our methods of gathering information just as you do. Not good enough. Agent Kang's voice crackled through the speakers. Captain Park, check your ship's computer logs. Someone has been transmitting coded messages to Dragon Space for weeks. Someone on your ship has been feeding them information. Dr. Yoon stepped forward, his face grim. Captain, I can check the communication logs. It will take a few minutes. While Dr. Yoon worked at a computer terminal, Agent Kang continued his accusations. The Dragons aren't here to honor Admiral Lee. They're here to steal military secrets and plan new attacks. The peace treaty was always meant to be temporary, just long enough for them to rebuild their fleets. That is a lie, Scout Chindar protested, her silver scales flashing with agitation. Is it? Agent Kang asked. Then explain why Hegemony Intelligence has intercepted Dragon communications planning attacks on human colonies. Thexmore's massive head turned toward the speakers. What attacks? No such plans exist. Captain, Dr. Yoon called from his computer terminal. I found something. There have been unauthorized transmissions from the ship's computer core. Someone with high-level access has been sending coded messages. Park felt the walls closing in around him. Who sent them? The access codes belong to... Dr. Yoon's voice trailed off as he read the screen. Admiral Lee Taemin. The command center fell silent. Everyone stared at Dr. Yoon in shock. That's impossible, Commander Choi said. The Admiral would never betray humanity. Agent Kang's voice cut through their confusion. Unless he was working with the Dragons all along. Think about it, Captain Park. Who negotiated the peace treaty? Who insisted on keeping Dragon ships near human space? Who wanted Dragons at his own funeral? Park's mind raced. It was true that Admiral Lee had been unusually interested in Dragon culture. He had spent countless hours studying their traditions and language. But betraying humanity? It didn't make sense. There has to be another explanation, Park said firmly. The explanation is simple, Agent Kang replied. The Admiral was compromised, possibly through mind control or some other Dragon technology. The peace treaty is a trap and you're all walking into it. Thexmore moved closer to the communication panel, his voice like controlled thunder. Agent Kang Hyun-soo, you speak of things you do not understand. Admiral Lee was not compromised. He was enlightened. Enlightened? Agent Kang's laugh was harsh. Is that what you call it when you turn humans against their own species? I call it wisdom, Thexmore replied. The wisdom to see beyond old hatreds. The argument was interrupted by another alarm. This one was different, more urgent. Captain, Lieutenant Han reported, the Voidwalker ships have decloaked. They're moving into attack formation around the funeral fleet. All ships, battle stations, General Lim ordered automatically. Wait, Agent Kang's voice commanded. This is exactly what the Dragons want. The moment you fire your weapons, the other alien fleets will join the battle. You'll be outnumbered 10-1. Park looked around the command center at the faces of humans and Dragons working together. Despite Agent Kang's accusations, he could see genuine cooperation and respect between the two species. Agent Kang, Park said slowly, if you're so concerned about human safety, why are you working with the Hegemony? They're not exactly known for their friendship with humanity. There was a pause before Agent Kang answered, because the Hegemony understands the truth about this galaxy. There can be no lasting peace between predator species. The strong survive by destroying the weak. The Admiral forgot that lesson. The Admiral learned a better lesson, Dr. Yoon said suddenly, looking up from his computer. Captain, I've decoded the messages that were sent from his personal access codes. They weren't military secrets. They were cultural exchanges, language lessons, stories about human and Dragon history. What? General Lim asked. The Admiral was teaching the Dragons about human concepts of honor and sacrifice, Dr. Yoon explained. And he was learning about Dragon traditions in return. These weren't spy reports. They were letters between friends. Thexmore's expression softened. Admiral Lee wished to understand why Dragons and humans fought with such similar courage. He believed that understanding would make peace stronger. Captain, Scout Chindar said urgently, Void Walker ships are charging weapons. Whatever we're going to do, we need to decide now. Park looked at the tactical display showing alien ships surrounding the funeral fleet. Human vessels and Dragon ships were positioned together, ready to fight as allies for the first time in history. Agent Kang, Park said into the communication system, you're wrong about Admiral Lee, and you're wrong about the Dragons. The Admiral saw something that you can't see. He saw that enemies can become friends if they're willing to try. You're making a mistake, Captain, Agent Kang warned. When those Dragons turn on you, remember that I tried to save you. Lord Thexmore, Park said, turning to the Dragon Lord. Are you ready to fight beside humans to protect this funeral? Thexmore's amber eyes blazed with determination. Captain Park, I am ready to die beside humans to protect Admiral Lee's memory. Then let's show these aliens what human-dragon cooperation looks like, Park said. All ships prepare for battle. But remember, we're not just fighting for our lives. We're fighting for the future that Admiral Lee believed in. As the first enemy ships began their attack run, Park realized that the real funeral for Admiral Lee Tae-min was about to begin, not with words and ceremonies, but with the kind of battle that would prove whether his dream of lasting peace could survive in a galaxy full of those who profited from endless war. The space around the Eternal Dawn erupted into chaos as enemy ships attacked from 3 directions at once. Voidwalker vessels, their dark hulls barely visible against the stars, fired beams of purple energy that could slice through armor like paper. Hegemony cruisers launched waves of missiles while maintaining perfect formation. In the distance, crystalline Empire ships moved like living jewels, their weapons creating beautiful but deadly patterns of light. Captain Park Jin-woo gripped the command chair as the ship shook under enemy fire. Around him, human and dragon officers worked together as if they had been allies for years instead of hours. Dragon Squadron 3, cover our port flank, General Lim commanded through the communication system. Human destroyers follow their lead. Understood, General, came the rumbling voice of a dragon ship commander. We are honored to fight beside you. On the main view screen, Park watched something that would have been impossible just days ago. Dragon warships and human vessels moved in perfect coordination, their different fighting styles complementing each other beautifully. Human ships were fast and clever, using tactics and maneuvering to confuse the enemy. Dragon ships were powerful and direct, their ancient weapons cutting through enemy defenses with overwhelming force. Captain, Scout Chindar reported from her station, Lord Thexmore's ship is engaging the Hegemony command vessel directly. They're trying to break through to help us. Park nodded, then turned to Dr. Yoon. Doctor, is the ceremonial hall ready? As ready as it can be during a battle, Dr. Yoon replied. The Admiral's coffin is secure and the memory-sharing equipment is still functioning. Good. As soon as we have a break in the fighting, we proceed with the funeral. That's what Admiral Lee would have wanted. The ship shuddered again as a Voidwalker beam grazed their shields. Commander Choi Min-ho looked up from his tactical display with concern. Captain, enemy ships are trying to push us away from the ceremonial position. They don't want us to complete the funeral. Then we hold position no matter what, Park said firmly. The battle raged for another hour, with neither side gaining a clear advantage. Human and dragon ships fought together with growing confidence, their combined tactics proving more effective than anyone had expected. But the enemy outnumbered them, and their ships were taking damage. Then, unexpectedly, the enemy fire began to slacken. Captain, Lieutenant Han reported from sensors, the Crystalline Empire ships are withdrawing. They're moving back to observation range. What about the others? Hegemony and Voidwalkers are still engaged, but they're not pressing their attacks as hard. Park frowned. Something had changed, but he couldn't figure out what. His question was answered by an incoming transmission. This time the voice was definitely alien, with the musical quality of a Crystalline Empire speaker. Human and dragon vessels, this is Crystal Singer Velthera of the Empire Observation Fleet. We came to witness the failure of your alliance. Instead, we have seen something unprecedented. You fight together as if you were one species, the alien voice continued. The Crystalline Empire has no quarrel with those who honor their dead with courage. We withdraw from this battle. One of the enemy fleets was leaving. Park felt a surge of hope. But Agent Kang's voice crackled through the communication system again. Don't celebrate yet, Captain. The real test is just beginning. As if summoned by his words, a new alarm sounded. A small ship, barely larger than a fighter, was approaching the Eternal Dawn at high speed. That ship is on a collision course, Lieutenant Han reported. It's not responding to our warnings. Intercept it, General Lim ordered. Wait. Thexmore's voice came through the speakers from his own ship. I recognize that vessel design. It's a Hegemony infiltrator. Someone is trying to board the Eternal Dawn during the battle. Park's blood ran cold. Security teams to all docking bays. Locked down the ceremonial hall. But it was too late. The small ship had already attached itself to the hull near one of the maintenance airlocks. Within minutes, they had intruders aboard. Captain, came the voice of Security Chief Bei Wansik over the intercom. "We have armed hostiles moving toward the ceremonial hall. They're led by someone in a human uniform." "Agent Kang," Park muttered. "He's not just giving orders. He's here." Park General Lim and Scout Chindar raced through the corridors toward the ceremonial hall. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of fighting as security teams engaged the intruders. They arrived at the hall to find Agent Kang standing beside Admiral Lee's coffin, with a weapon pointed at the glass case. He was a thin man with cold eyes and the kind of face that belonged to someone who had seen too much war. "Don't come any closer," Agent Kang said. "I won't let you complete this mockery of a funeral." "Agent Kang," Park said carefully, "what do you think you're accomplishing here?" "I'm saving humanity from its own stupidity," Kang replied. "The Admiral was a great man once, but he was fooled by dragon lies. I won't let his funeral become a symbol of human weakness." "The Admiral was never weak," General Lim said firmly. "He was the strongest man I ever knew. He made peace with the creatures that killed millions of our people." Kang shouted, "How is that strength?" Scout Chindar stepped forward slowly, her hands visible and empty. "Agent Kang, may I tell you something about strength? In dragon culture, the strongest warriors are those who can turn enemies into allies. Admiral Lee was the strongest human we ever met because he could see past his own hatred." "Dragon lies," Kang muttered, but his weapon wavered slightly. The hall's doors opened and Dragon Lord Thexmore entered. His massive frame filled the doorway, but he moved slowly and carefully, showing no aggression. "Agent Kang Hyun-soo," Thexmore said in his deep voice, "I know who you are. You lost your family on the colony world of New Busan. Dragonfire killed your wife and children." Kang's face twisted with pain and rage. "Yes, your people murdered them. And now you expect me to forgive?" "I do not expect forgiveness," Thexmore replied. "I ask only for understanding. I also lost family in that battle. My youngest daughter died when human ships bombed our nesting grounds. For years I hated all humans as you hate all dragons." "Then why are you here?" Kang demanded. "Because Admiral Lee taught me that hatred is a chain that binds both the hater and the hated," Thexmore said. "He showed me that breaking that chain sets both free." Dr. Yoon entered the hall carrying a data pad. "Agent Kang, there's something you need to see." Admiral Lee left a personal message for anyone who opposed the funeral. Before Kang could object, Dr. Yoon activated the device. Admiral Lee's voice filled the hall one last time. "If you're listening to this," the Admiral said, "it means someone is trying to stop my funeral because they believe I betrayed humanity. I understand that feeling. I felt the same way for years. But I learned something important during the peace negotiations. The dragons we fought were not monsters. They were parents and children and lovers just like us. They mourned their dead and honored their heroes just like us." The Admiral's voice grew stronger. "Agent Kang, if you're the one listening to this, I want you to know that I never forgot your family. I never forgot any of the families we lost. But I also learned that the only way to honor their sacrifice is to make sure no other families suffer the same loss, human or dragon." Kang's weapon slowly lowered as he listened. "The peace treaty isn't about forgetting the past," Admiral Lee continued. "It's about choosing a different future."
A future where our children can grow up without fear of burning skies? Tears ran down Agent Kang's face.
I can't. They killed everything I loved." Thexmore stepped closer. "Agent Kang, I cannot give you back your family. But I can promise you this. If you allow this funeral to proceed, if you help us build the peace Admiral Lee dreamed of, their deaths will have meaning. They will be remembered as the last victims of a war that ended, not the first victims of a war that continued forever." For a long moment, the hall was silent, except for the distant sounds of battle outside. Then Agent Kang slowly placed his weapon on the floor. "I don't know if I can forgive," he said quietly, "but maybe I can try to understand." Park stepped forward. "Agent Kang, would you like to participate in the funeral?" The Admiral left instructions that all who knew him could share their memories. Outside, the sounds of battle were fading. The combined human and dragon fleet had driven off the remaining attackers. 2 hours later, the ceremonial hall was filled with beings from 2 species that had been enemies just days before. Human officers stood beside dragon warriors as they shared stories of Admiral Lee's courage, wisdom, and dedication to peace. When it came time for the final moment of the ceremony, Thexmore approached the coffin one last time. The massive Dragon Lord placed both hands on the glass case and raised his head toward the ceiling. What came from his throat was unlike any sound the humans had ever heard. It was deep and mournful, filled with grief and respect and hope all at once. It was the sound of a dragon crying over the coffin of a human hero. The cry echoed through the ship and out into space, carried by radio waves to every vessel in the fleet. Human and dragon ships alike fell silent as they listened to the most beautiful and heartbreaking sound any of them had ever heard. When the cry finally faded, Thexmore looked down at Admiral Lee's peaceful face. "Admiral Lee Taman," the Dragon Lord said, "your death has not ended the peace.